In this video, I'm tackling a project that's equal parts breeze and frustration. Building a screen door from scratch. I mean, how hard could it be? Now, I'm not gonna lie. There were some bumps along the way. The lumber did not want to cooperate. I made a few questionable choices. And there were many moments where this project seemed destined for the fire pit. So, can I pull this project off? Stick around and find out, because I'm showing all of my screw-ups and setbacks. And of course I forgot my damn drill. Please stay. Don't fall. The first step in this project was to remove the existing screen door that came with the house. After 3 years in the house, the screen was torn to shreds, the frame was bent, the clasp didn't latch, it just needed to go. And once out of the way, I could begin measuring the casing. I measured in 6 places to get as much information as I needed. I measured across the top of the casing, across the bottom of the casing, and across the middle. I then repeated the process to get the vertical measurements, left side, middle, and right side. My casing was pretty close to even, but there were some small variances. And after everything was measured, I transferred those measurements to a crude drawing and added 1/8 of an inch to all 4 sides. That extra 1/8 of an inch, it'll get trimmed away down the road. Here you can see the method of joinery I'll be using for this door. Essentially, I'll be creating a 1-inch depth rabbet reinforced with 80mm dominoes. Now it's at this point, you can actually see mistake number 1 in this project. Place your guesses as to what that mistake is into the comments below. Later on in the video, I'll show you how I went about correcting this complete brain fart of an omission. This project is phase 1 of a front fascia overhaul, which will include a front porch. So I went with Western red cedar, which I purchased from my local hardwood dealer. I'll begin by breaking everything down to rough lengths before heading over to the jointer. Now, here comes mistake number 2. I failed to take into consideration how much cedar loves to move. These boards were nowhere near flat when I started milling, and as we all should know, banana in equals banana out. I made the mistake of attempting to joint a bowed board that was twice as long as my infeed bed on my jointer. Essentially, I had spent a fair amount of time making the cedar smooth, not flat. And not flat boards, eventually, having joinery cut into them, is going to cause so many headaches later on in this build. So why would I continue on with this build knowing I had stock that wasn't perfectly suited for the joinery I had planned? Well, that brings me to mistake number 3. One of my greatest flaws as a worker of wood is impatience. I know this about myself, and yet I continue to deal with the fallout of my impulsiveness in almost every project. From experience, I should know that I should let stock rest after doing an initial mill, so I can let the board's freshly exposed grain acclimate to my shop and environmental conditions. I didn't do that in this project. And again, because of my impatience, I had to scramble to mitigate the movement that I caused in these boards. Since moving to Spokane 3 years ago from the Bay Area, I have learned, and yet continually ignore, that no matter what I do, I'm going to have to contend with significant wood movement. For whatever reason, wood just does not want to stay flat here in the inland Northwest. And in the case of this project, I could literally see the stiles of this door bowing in on themselves. Now that bowing could have been the result of cedar just being cedar, perhaps the wood wasn't properly dried, or it was a combination of wood doing what wood does and my improper milling technique. Regardless, too many problems were rearing their ugly heads too early in this project. Now, at this stage in the video, let me circle back to mistake number 1 and ask you this question. Based upon what you've seen me do thus far, what did I forget to cut into my rails? I'll give you a second or two to mull over your answer. You seasoned woodsmiths probably have guessed it, but for all of you casual viewers, here's the answer. I didn't cut the rabbets along the long edges of the rails. Such a boneheaded rookie mistake. And the reason for not cutting those rabbets? Nothing more than sheer panic. See, in between shots, I was checking fitment of pieces and triple checking measurements, and not to my surprise, the bowing of the stiles had gotten pretty bad. I wish I had video evidence of this bowing I'm continually referring to, but you'll have to take my word for it when I say I could literally see daylight down the length of each stile. I was now at an impasse in this project. I had two options: scrap it and start over, or soldier on and see if I could salvage it. Being the stubborn person I am, I chose to lay out my dominoes and pray to the wood gods that glue and the green hole punch would save this door from the fire pit. So I haphazardly, and let me say it again, haphazardly started to lay out where I was going to put those mortises, not taking into account the future solution I was going to have to confront because of mistake number 3. More on that to come. Because I was in such a rush to get this frame glued up and into clamps as soon as humanly possible, I didn't bother to check the depth settings on the Domino's 8mm cutter. I had 8mm by 80mm dominoes on hand. I felt I needed to stagger the depth of the mortises to see if that would prevent any further cupping, which meant having to bore deeper than the cutter would allow. Now, I wisely cut all of the mortises on the loose setting to give me some wiggle room during the glue up. I now know the 8mm cutter has a total cut depth of 60mm. I was cutting at 70mm to account for that 1-inch rabbet, thus the burn marks that you see. Not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, as it's all going to get covered up once it's glued together, but I'm sure I'll have a few Festool snobs tell me I punched the holes incorrectly, and honestly, I don't care. The thing is done. I ended up putting a total of 24 mortises into the rails and stiles, probably overkill for this project, but I was desperately in need of some serious help, and from here, I could do a dry assembly before heading to the point of no return. Future Jared here with, well, another mistake. Sorry. I lost the footage of the mad scramble that was this glue up and how I went about cutting the rabbets on the rabbitless rail pieces. So to remedy that oopsie, I've mocked up some not cedar examples to show you how this part of the video worked out in real life. If you've ever had a complex glue up with multiple pieces that all need to be as precise and square as possible, then you can empathize with this facsimile. I didn't have epoxy on hand to give me that longer open time, so I rolled with what I had, which was polyurethane glue. As the only woodworker on YouTube who seems to use the stuff, poly glue is great for exterior projects. However, the downsides to poly glue are a much shorter open time, and you'll have to contend with that foam. So as I was scrambling to line everything up, continually checking for square, and trying not to poo myself, I eventually got everything lined up after 10 minutes in real time. Now for the $60 solution to those missing rabbits. This unit of a bit came from Whiteside, not sponsored, and is significantly larger than the rabbiting bits we're all used to. I wasn't the least bit hesitant to swing this 5-ounce hunk of metal freehand because I'm not scared of routers, and I felt completely confident making the cut by hand. I turned the speed down to level 3, which was like 15,000 RPM, and I let her rip. And this thing worked like a dream. Problem solved-ish. Anywho, money well spent on a bit that I'll probably never use again. Now, at this stage in the video, I'm going to do something that I rarely do, and that is to ask you to please like, comment, and subscribe. Not only did I put in a fair amount of time into building this door, but almost equal that time in putting together this video. Hopefully, by laying out all of my mistakes and showing you my vulnerabilities as a fellow woodworker, I've earned the right to make that ask of you. This video was a hell of an endeavor. I don't have editors, I don't have videographers, I don't have photographers supplementing this channel. It's all me. And by doing the like, comment, and subscribe thing, you'll be helping to push this video's message to a larger audience and making a woodworker very grateful for your support. As for the rest of this video, I have one more airheaded mistake to share with you that you've all probably done at one point before wrapping up with some words of encouragement. At this stage in the project, it was time to test fit the door and see how I had done. Full disclosure, I had let the unfinished door rest for approximately 1 week after the glue up to see if all of the bowing and cupping would naturally settle itself out, and surprisingly it had. The door was flush and I didn't have any issues with the fit being wonky inside of the casing. Remember back to my initial measurements where I had added those extra 1/8 of an inch on each side of the door? Well, this is exactly why you do that. I was a wee bit tight in the upper right-hand corner of the casing, but the other 3 sides, I was looking pretty good. I had approximately an 1/8 inch or less to shimmy the door around to even up those gaps. And with another slim pass with the track saw, I could test fit again, and to my surprise, and yes, I was surprised, this had worked out considering all of the early problems in this project. The door fit perfectly. Now I could focus on covering up those rabbets and horribly chiseled out joints in the lower sections of the door. And it's at this stage in the video where I'm going to lose some people because of what I'm about to show you. Inevitably, whenever I show projects where I use the Shaper Origin, I must contend with commenters who flat out don't understand the value of this machine. So I'm going to take the opportunity to make a series of value statements regarding your opinions on these types of machines. Number 1, if you don't have a machine like this in your shop, you're way behind the curve. Whether it's specifically the Origin, a traditional gantry-style CNC, a large format laser, or a 3D printer, these types of machines are now absolute necessities in our workshops. They can be tremendous time savers, they can make problem solving much less frustrating, and generally, they allow their users to create and produce items more efficiently than by doing them by hand. Secondly, these machines aren't the future, they're the now. If you leverage your woodworking for profit and you don't have one of these automated types of machines, you're not going to be able to compete in today's ultra-competitive world. If you're a hobbyist who isn't concerned with profit, a machine like the Shaper can elevate your woodworking experience to highs previously unseen. And lastly, enough with complaining about the cost of the Origin. Woodworking is expensive and so are the tools. This machine has replaced so many tools in my shop and more importantly, has made me not buy many other tools I'm told I need. So, if you're gonna blast me in the comments for using a luxury tool on a process in this project you think could have been done with a jigsaw, then more power to you and enjoy living in the past. Okay, judgments aside, I now needed to figure out some trim for the inside of the door. I had several scrap pieces from this project that were milled to different thickness, or is it thicknesses, and I didn't like how any of the offcuts looked. Off camera, I ripped down 2 new sets of trim. The trim on the lower portion of the door was planed down to 7 millimeters in thickness, while the trim on the upper portion was planed down to 17 millimeters. And once I installed and sanded everything, the trim on both top and bottom was proud 5-ish millimeters. I then began to hand sand all of the edges of the door, as I have a 5-year-old daughter who loves to touch everything and criticize how well I sanded things. And then I did some pre-finishing of the rabbets before getting to sanding the inside face of the door to 180 grit. Now I could move on to getting the mesh installed. I've built mini screen doors, and one of the best tips I've learned about getting the screen as tight as possible is to put the door under tension. The block of wood I'm putting under the top rail on the door was about 1 inch in thickness and is going to act like a fulcrum. And notice that when clamping the middle of the door, I'm not putting so much tension that I crack the wood or any of my joints. Also, you don't want to put so much tension on the door that once you're done stapling the screen down, the mesh will tear when the tension is released. I'd suggest 2 to 3 squeezes on your squeeze clamps to get the door to bow maybe 1/4 of an inch. Now you can roll out your screen and begin stapling. I chose to go with this mesh from the orange box door because I wanted something a bit beefier and darker for more privacy. Because of the way my house is oriented and living in Spokane, we get a lot of windy days, and the weight of the screen is going to hold up well in the wind and will also help to black out some of the sun in the afternoons. I would also highly suggest picking up a battery-powered stapler if you don't already have one. These things are so handy to have. Doesn't matter which brand, just get one. No jamming, no misfired staples, no having to hammer in staples that didn't drive in all the way. As far as staples themselves, I used 5/16 T50 staples, and I was not stingy. I put staples in every 4 to 6 inches. You'll want to start at the top of your door, then pull the mesh as tight as you can before stapling down the bottom side of your screen. Don't worry if at this point the screen isn't perfectly tight that you can bounce 1/4 off of it. When you release that tension, it will tighten up. You can then go around the perimeter of your screen and work from the middle of the door out on all sides. And once you're all stapled down, you can grab a sharp razor and cut away the excess. Release the tension on the door, and you should have a perfectly tight screen. Putting the door under tension is a great way to get a perfect result if you're installing a screen without an extra set of hands. It works every time. I'm using hot glue to act as a temporary holding solution for the first lower screen panel. The cedar plywood I used in this project was literally the last sheet on the shelf and was pretty boogered up. Both panels were warped, so I needed a holding solution that would be temporary in case the plywood doesn't hold up over time. I then laid the first panel into place and could then roll out the remainder of my mesh. On smaller openings in screen doors, putting the door under tension isn't necessary, as pulling the mesh by hand will do the trick over a short span. And much like the top section, you'll staple down one side, you'll move to the opposite side, and then work from the middle out on the remaining 2 sides. I then laid down a second plywood panel to cover the staples and add some depth and design to the door before using 3/4 inch screws to secure the whole screen assembly to the door. Now for my 5th and final screw up. Wait for it. Wait for it. God. Yep, I apparently had 2 1.5 brad nails left in the chamber instead of the 1 1/4 I needed, so I fired 2 through the face, because nobody's ever done that before. An annoying circumstance, but an easy fix. You just bust out your kiddo's 6-ounce pink hammer and give them a few taps. No one will ever know, except you, me, and the tens of people who made it this far into the video. Guys, we've got 3.5 minutes left. You've made it this far into the video. Let's finish strong, eh? For a finish, I'm using Rubio Monocoat's new exterior finish Duro Grit. This stuff is brand new to the market, so I'm taking a flyer on the durability of this stuff. I won't be telling you this is the cat's meow of exterior finishes because I don't know if that's true. I enjoy Rubio's products, and this door is going to be my test piece. Down the road, I will have a long-term test and review of DuraGrit, but for now, I'll just walk you through the application process. I watered down the finish 20%, and I actually only used about 5 ounces total to finish this side of the door. I didn't water down the backside of the door, and I used quite a bit more. When applying this finish, you want to get the product on with a brush, making sure you have ample coverage. Then, without adding any new product to the brush, back brush with the grain. Super simple. Don't need to wipe anything off. However, quick word of warning. I was applying this finish on a mild 70-ish degree day, and the finish does tend to tack rather quickly. So work in small sections And then as you move on to a new section, just feather into what you have already laid down. Guys and gals, this project flat out kicked my ass. Truth be told, this wasn't the video I wanted to make. I fully intended this video to be a step-by-step tutorial on how to properly build a screen door, not a showcase of all of my blunders. But I believe in showing mistakes, and more importantly, owning those mistakes as a way of learning. If we all got every step in our projects perfectly executed 100% of the time, woodworking would be pretty damn boring. I mean, more boring than it already is. So I hope you recognize that I'm never going to pretend to be an expert, nor am I ever going to claim that I'm some sort of guru-level woodworker. I'm a guy with tools who likes to make things out of wood, and I screw up. But I succeed more often than I fail. Not solely because of skill, but because I choose to persevere. And therein lies the true message of this video. As much as I'd love to get those hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of views and astonish the world with my skills as a builder, that's not going to happen. No, the true message of this video is to be kind to yourself. I could have easily scrapped this project 2 or 3 times because of my misplaced belief that my projects must be perfect because I show them on YouTube. But the reality is, this door isn't for you. It's for me. And I can live with the way that I corrected my mistakes. So what should you take away from this video? Simply this. Problems are going to arise in our projects, and it's how we go about remedying those issues that makes working with wood worthwhile. Only you will ever see those imperfections. So remember, treat yourself kindly.